Hello, hello. Oh, good. Good evening. I want to get things started. I know that some people have something they want to do at 8:05 tonight. Can't imagine what, but go Red Sox. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This has been a very, very difficult issue for all of the communities along the Merrimack River, particularly those of us who are downriver. I felt for many years that I was sort of talking to the wind and wasn't really making much headway in terms of this particular issue of CSO activations and what's happening those of us who are downriver. But over the last, I'd say, 6 to 9 months, there's been a lot more activity and interest and people coming together to learn and understand more about this issue. I'm pleased that the Merrimack River Watershed Council, who has developed in 76, when did you become 76, became incorporated as a nonprofit who became a watchdog and has been collecting information about pollution and CSO activations and really been the watchdog of our river. Certainly the condition of the Merrimack River several decades ago was so much worse. It was one of the most polluted rivers in our country, and certainly things have improved. But now it's really important that we unite as communities along the river to be able to figure out what we can do to address these issues. One of the things that I really think it's important to understand, and I know that you'll see some slides tonight, is that the communities along the river were created during the Industrial Revolution, and there are these massive structures that were created that were just discharging raw sewage right into the Merrimack River. And so I know that all along the river, there used to be a lot of federal funds that upgraded our wastewater treatment facilities, and during the 60s and 70s, and that funding source has gone away, but there still hasn't been a tremendous effort of communities to upgrade their existing plants. Newburyport just finished a $37 million upgrade to our wastewater treatment plant, and what's frustrating to us is that you could essentially drink what we're putting in the river, but you wouldn't want to because of what's coming downriver. I know that Amesbury has done the same, as well as Salisbury, and I know the other communities upriver are still working on upgrading their facilities, but it's billions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars, and so we need to unite as communities to begin to figure out how we can begin to address this issue. I have recently presented information from DEP, who came and did a slideshow to the mayors and managers, the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, the Merrimack River Watershed Council came and did a presentation to the mayors and managers last week. Both of those slide presentations have been sent to the governor and lieutenant governor. I have a conference call with the environmental team of Senator Markey's office in Washington on Wednesday. So the Herald was out yesterday doing a story and a video. So I'm very pleased that there's starting to be a lot more attention and interest, and obvious that's by all of you are here today. What I think is really important is that we unite as one solid group that develops a plan and what we think are the most appropriate solutions going forward. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. We certainly do not have the funding in, the state government, and we need to look to the feds for help, especially since we're talking about Manchester. New Hampshire is probably the worst pollutant. And I understand that they only have to report their CSOs to the EPA once a year on January 15th. And then you look at Nashua, and then we start coming down the river in terms of the CSOs. So I'm really, really pleased to see all of you here tonight. I would also like to take a minute and recognize some of the elected officials who are here. Linda Campbell from Methuen, who has been really starting to pay attention from the Methuen area about this issue and has been working on a bill to fund additional generators for wastewater treatment plants, and we've had a conversation tonight about trying to look at the next bill we're going to file because it ended up on the floor. The Senate passed a notification bill, but we didn't get too far with that bill. So we've got to regroup once the legislature gets into formal session in January and begin to refile a bill. I also would like to recognize Diana DiZoglio, who is a state rep also in communities impacted and contributing to this problem, and is also a candidate for state rep. Really pleased to see you here, Diana. And I think Mayor Gray from Amesbury, who I think all of you know has been very, very vocal about this issue and the impact it's having on Amesbury and his section of the river. And I think I saw our council president, Barry Connell, come in. Did I? Ah, there you are, Barry. Nice to have you here also. Are there any other elected officials? I'm sorry, Feroz Khan, who is our city councilor at large, who is here also. So I appreciate all the elected officials being here. And I'm now going to turn it over to Rusty and John McCone, Rusty Russell and John McCone, who will walk us through their presentation and hopefully provide a new level of information for those of you who haven't had a lot of information about what's been going on with the CSOs. So, Rusty.
Thank you, Mayor Holliday. It's really an honor to be here. Pleasure. Thank you very much for setting this up. We thank you for making the space available. Greetings to all elected officials and to all of you who are taking time out from otherwise possibly preparing for the ball game tonight to talk about what else do we talk about after dinner but sewage. So let's begin. I've got about 15 slides here. I'm going to zoom through because the point tonight is to have a public forum, to have an airing of thoughts and opinions and questions about where we are, what we do with a river that is still, many years after the Clean Water Act was passed, still has a fairly major sewage problem, at least when it rains. And also, I just want to say something when one of the statewide papers prints an article that includes a photograph of yourself with a giant headline in about 48-point type saying "making a stink." You've got to hide, but I'm not going to be able to do that tonight. So without further notice, this is not the Merrimack. This is the Cuyahoga River, but many of you will remember when it caught fire a number of times back in 1969. This is what our rivers used to be like, but the Merrimack, except for not catching fire, was no exception. This is a report from the 60s describing the Merrimack as totally polluted up and down its entire length. Every day, more than 120 million gallons of raw sewage. Basically, the river was treated like an open sewer. That amounts to about 44 billion gallons of sewage a year. We've come a long way since then, and I want to point that out. It's important to note progress has been made, and we're not here to try to diminish or downplay that. But the point is that we need to do more. The river does not meet federal Clean Water Act standards, nor is it safe in certain places at certain times, and it's important to know when those are, and it's important for us to talk about what we can do about that. And we have some ideas, but I really would like to hear yours as well, and I think the elected officials here would agree with that. Just briefly, I won't bore you with our story. As Mayor Holliday said, we've been around since 76. That's 1976, not 1776. And we are a nonprofit NGO that looks after the Merrimack River and its watershed. The watershed's the fourth largest in New England, so it's a big responsibility, and we've had our ups and downs, but we're trying to get engaged better, more with you, and work on some issues that people care about, and I think this is one of them. So this is our program: clean water, a healthy watershed, and expanded recreation, and we can't do one without the others. I'm assuming not everybody knows what a combined sewer overflow is, so I'll just quickly tell you. I mean, I realize that some of you are, well in advance of a lot of these slides, and some of you, I think, probably would appreciate having a little background. So forgive me if you already know this stuff, but you happen to encounter it, from toilets and showers and sinks, et cetera, goes to the sewage treatment plant. And the other kind of sewage, polluted stormwater runoff, essentially runs without treatment into the ground, or often into the nearest water body via those street drains you see. And hopefully you also see some signs next to them saying, don't dump here because it flows into the Merrimack or into whatever the local river is. That's a separate problem. It is a problem. But when we have a separated system, and places like Newburyport with its new sewage treatment plant, Amesbury, Salisbury, Marlborough, Derry, Concord, and Franklin, to name cities and towns in the Merrimack watershed, they have separated systems, and that means that they don't have sewage overflows governed or by their sewage treatment plant. But there are 6 systems in the Merrimack. They're all older cities that have so-called combined sewers, and these were considered very efficient ways of treating sewage 150 years ago. It was a brilliant engineering solution for a big problem, which was there was almost no centralized sewage treatment to deal with the problem and get it out of town. So what the combined sewers did was take all that rainwater and all the sanitary sewage, combine it together in a combined pipe, and forget about the sewage treatment plant. That would not come along for another 75 to 100 years. Dump it into the river. And that's what happened. That was the way sewage was treated. And I want to remind you that, in 1875, stormwater runoff wasn't as, well, it's not pristine these days either, but it was really pristine then, because our roads were not covered with cars, they were covered with horses. And I have to say, when I drove around Lawrence today, I did not see a single horse. So that's another improvement, I think. But the bottom line with the combined systems is that when we have a rainstorm, and sometimes it's not much of a rainstorm, it certainly doesn't have to be a downpour, the sewage plant can't handle the combined weight, the combination of sanitary sewage and stormwater. So it needs basically an overflow system. If it doesn't have it, sewage would back up into people's homes, and we would be talking about that at a public meeting, or it would flow into the sewage treatment plant and basically overwhelm it, which is also a problem for the sewage treatment plant. So instead, it essentially, through a system of weirs, when the pipes fill up enough with combined stormwater and sanitary sewage, it dumps into, again, the nearest waterway, and that around here is the Merrimack River or its tributaries. There are 6 such systems on the Merrimack. This is the big picture, and you can see these systems were quite popular in older industrial areas, particularly in New England and in the industrialized Midwest. Probably about 750 or so exist today. And so this is not just a local problem, it's a national problem. And it's one that we're really seeing the brunt of here. Oh yeah, this is, I'm not beating on engineers, but this is one of the engineering geniuses that was behind combined sewer systems. This is Alan Hazen, who was a very noted figure in civil engineering about 100 years ago. This is talking about waterworks men and what they need to do, which is just keep a stiff upper lip and tolerate a certain amount of sewage. We've come a long way since then. So moving from our quick sort of historical overview, the sewage story in the Merrimack is that there are 6 cities or 6 sewage systems that have combined sewers as part of their systems. 4 of them are in Massachusetts. Haverhill, Lawrence, as part of the greater Lawrence sanitary district, Lowell, and Fitchburg. Fitchburg dumps into the Nashua River, which joins the Merrimack in Nashua, New Hampshire. And then in New Hampshire, we have combined sewer systems in Nashua and also in Manchester. And I just want to note the Manchester system, as Mayor Holliday said, is really the worst offender. They're the largest polluter, as far as I can tell, in the Merrimack, responsible for between 150 and 250 million gallons a year of raw sewage. And we don't really know what's going on there. They report data to the state of New Hampshire and to EPA and to the rest of us once a year on January 15th, which is not a time people are usually paying attention to this. In the late 1990s, to continue the story, there was still more sewage dumping, more combined sewer overflows than we see today. And this is kind of an aggregate of what's sometimes by regulators referred to as the baseline. We're looking at the late 1990s. The combination of these six combined sewer systems is dumping nearly 800 million gallons a year into the Merrimack. We're now down to between 300 and 400 million gallons, so that's progress, but it is not the kind of progress that produces a clean or safe river. And many people, I talked to people about this issue, and a number of people have come to me and said, the river isn't polluted, it meets federal standards, it has to, because the Clean Water Act was passed back in the 1970s. Well, that's true, it was passed back in the 1970s, but they still don't meet federal standards, and I'll explain to you why and how this has happened and some of the problems that are involved in bringing them up to standards. The other thing some of you know, some of you may not know about the Merrimack is that it is the second largest drinking water source in New England, and it serves about 600,000 people. Manchester, Haverhill, possibly Nashua are planning to tap more into the Merrimack over the next maybe 10 or 15 years. So I'd expect the total number to rise to about 800,000 people who get their daily drinking water from the Merrimack. We do not claim this water is unpotable. It certainly is, it's to the contrary, it is. It's frequently tested, but there are some concerns about how you manage a system and how you treat a system that is heavily polluted and yet a major source of drinking water. And of course, the largest source in New England. What's the largest source of drinking water in New England? Quabbin, right, exactly. And Quabbin was created as a pristine reservoir. In fact, it's so pristine that a lawsuit by EPA to force Quabbin, the MWRA, to filter its water was defeated. A federal judge said the water's so clean you don't have to filter it, so saving a couple of billions of dollars. That is not true with the Merrimack, and as you can see, the big red dots are big sewage outflows. The little droplets are water systems. Lowell, Tewksbury, Andover, Methuen, and Lawrence all get their water from the Merrimack, and Nashua, New Hampshire also gets some Merrimack water during high-stress periods in the summer. So, and as you can see, all of those systems are downstream from several combined sewer overflow sewage treatment plants. So it's something we have to work on and look at. The other thing is CSOs potentially pose a danger to fish populations. This is a complicated slide. I won't go into it too much, but looking at recent major sewage CSO events at the Lowell sewage treatment plant this summer, and also looking at the level of dissolved oxygen, which is essential for marine wildlife, including fish. The level was dropped below the threshold of 5 parts per million dissolved oxygen several times during the summer, and apparently coinciding with the 4 major sewage dumps we saw by the Lowell plant. Needs further study. This is strictly back of the envelope, but it's something to be concerned about. And the idea here is that sewage in the river doesn't just affect humans and human health, though that's something that we're all concerned about. It also affects wildlife in a variety of ways, including this one. So how does this year look so far? And the answer is not so good. and we're not over yet. You'll probably all remember there was a big wind and rainstorm last October 30th. Power went out totally in the Lawrence sewage treatment plant, and we had heavy rains and huge sewage overflows, both in Lawrence and Lowell and in several other places. And I've noticed that historical pattern. We have heavy rains and we have more sewage. So we're not quite there yet. But I just want to point out that looking at sort of two of the larger releasers of sewage nearby, upstream, Greater Lawrence Sewage Sanitary District, whose plant is in North Andover, last year released about a total of 17 million gallons of raw sewage. Not great, but better than the past. This year, the plant is up to about, well, it's actually more than 75. It's up to about 80 million gallons. And, you know, we could have two more sizable overflows before the year is done. So that, it doesn't look like we're moving in a positive direction. And Lowell is about even with its 5-year average or a 6-year average, but again, the year's not over. So it's not been a good year, and part of the reason, or maybe the main reason, is we've had more rain. Quickly looking at a couple of sewage treatment plants, this is what the data looks like in terms of outfalls and activations. Looks like it's getting slightly better, and it is, but now we're sort of reaching a point of stasis, and if we look at that point and blow it up, we don't really see exactly a pattern. And the question is, where do we go from here? And that's what I hope to hear from you about. And this is Lawrence, and as you can see, the record so far this year is through the roof, which is unfortunate, but it leads to the question of what's going on. Haverhill is slowly going down, but in Haverhill there will be a sewage overflow with as little as 1/10 of an inch of rain. So those are things to be seriously concerned about. And then the biggest polluter, between 250 and 350 million gallons a year, is the Manchester, New Hampshire plant. And as I've said, we know very little about what's going on there or what the future holds, and that's upstream of all of us. There is a relationship, we think, between the amount of rainfall and CSOs. This quickly graphs it out looking at aggregate CSOs as well as rainfall. They seem to work together. So one of the questions is, what is the rainfall situation looking like going forward? I'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing you need to know, and this answers or provides a partial answer to the question of why these plants aren't sort of in jail, as it were, because they're violating the Clean Water Act. The answer is that they're all under court order to eliminate their CSOs or dramatically reduce them, but they have been given, as part of this court order or EPA consent decree, a long period of time, 20 to 30 years, to comply. Depends on the plant, and it depends, these are individual orders, but they have long periods of time. That isn't such a problem, well, in a way it's a done deal, but it isn't such a problem because it's expensive to do this, so we have to also consider what it costs. But as far as we can tell, a number of the key plants are kind of not moving forward. And I've talked to EPA in the last couple of weeks to get a quick snapshot of what the story is at Haverhill, Lawrence, Lowell, and Manchester. And in Haverhill, we're sort of taking baby steps. It's not the biggest system, but it's the one closest to us here. Greater Lawrence has a goal of having only 4 sewage overflows a year, which might be good or bad depending on how severe they are, but right now it's having an average of 11, and the number has not gone down. So that's a serious problem. It's not clear what Lawrence is going to do to meet the issue. Lowell is proposing something called an integrated plan. I know the folks, Mark Young is here and Greg Coyle from Lowell, so hopefully we'll hear a little bit from them about what their proposal is for moving forward. And Manchester is an interesting story because this is the worst polluter. They submitted a plan to sort of take the next big step in reducing their overflows back in 2010. And they're still in negotiations with EPA. EPA says they can't really talk to me about it because they're confidential. So, and when that plan is implemented, whenever they reach agreement, it's going to take 25 years to fully install. So it's hard to tell. You know, is it 25 years? Is it 35 years? Hard to say, but it looks like we're looking at 35 years. And that's a problem for the biggest polluter on the river, upstream of us. So that's a quick thing. So what, in terms of the future, what does it hold? While the CSO treatment plants are slowly trying to clean up their act, it's getting rainier. And the thing that really causes the worst kind of combined sewer overflows are these sudden rainstorms we get. Is the prospect of our getting more sudden rainstorms greater or less? Well, the answer is greater. All climate change studies are projecting that rainfall in the Northeast is going to actually have the highest change in rainfall, more rainfall, that is, of any part of the country, and it's also going to be the area that is subject to more sudden rainstorms. And these are some fairly complex composite maps that came out of a study done by the National Climate Assessment in the United States last year. But we see in the the change in rainfall in the Northeast over the last 100 years has been about a 15% increase. And the study predicts that heavy rain in most of the U.S., including this part of the U.S., will increase even more over the 21st century. And the report says it has a high confidence in that conclusion. So I guess what I'm saying to you is that as we sort of reach a sticking point on attacking this problem, we're going to see it getting worse as rainstorms get worse and more frequent. And that's not something we're going to have a whole lot of control about. The other point I want to make is that there is some scientific research that suggests that CSOs do have health impacts on humans. And we were only able to find really one peer-reviewed study that looked at the question, and very fortunately that study included the Lawrence area. And what it found was that there was in Lawrence, but not in two of the other areas studied, Boston and the Plymouth area near Cape Cod, that there was a statistical correlation between heavy rainstorms and an increase in gastrointestinal admissions to local emergency rooms. Now, it didn't develop a causal pathway, but that's interesting information. And, you know, in a study like this, it should raise some alarm bells as to how we think about our drinking water or our, other ways we interact with the Merrimack River. And these are, I won't read these to you, but essentially the conclusions are, yes, this is a statistically significant problem. Yes, it appears that it might be related to drinking water. And yes, with climate change, we're going to see more of this happening. And that was from 2015, so it's very, very recent. Well, the Merrimack's a big river, and engineers in the old days, as well as many other people, had a saying about dealing with pollution. They said the solution to pollution is dilution. And we might also, well, that's been largely rejected, but you might think, well, it's a big river, so really who cares? So we've tried to, and this is, I wanna credit Mayor Gray from Amesbury with this idea, translating sort of sewage dumped into a river as it's flowing into a swimming pool analogy, using the same proportionality, and basically looking at a sewage event that happened on August 12th this year in the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. It was a CSO discharge that lasted 2¼ hours. During that period of time, the combined sewers released 26 million gallons of raw sewage, and raw sewage combined with polluted stormwater. And then if we look at the flow of the Merrimack on that day, looking at USGS information, which is tabulated, I think, at where the Concord River merges with the Merrimack, but it's pretty close, we get a ratio. And then if we translate that, and this is a crude, I admit, a crude way of doing it, but we translate that into sewage dumped into an Olympic-sized swimming pool. How much does an Olympic-sized swimming pool hold? Well, it holds nearly 1 million gallons of water. And so how much sewage would we be dumping into that pool if we looked at the same proportions? And the answer is we're going to do it in 55-gallon drums, which is the efficient way to dump sewage into a swimming pool, we've calculated. 775 of them. So the question for you is, how many drums would it take before you gave up your lifetime dream of being an Olympic swimmer? A lot less than that, yeah, a lot. As somebody said to me, I would be out of there with 1 drum. So yeah, so it just helps bring this down to kind of size. So what to do? This is the fun part of the program, because it's the part when I shut up and you talk. We had some ideas, and these are some of them. But I think this is a public forum. So with that as background, maybe what I should do is say, are there any sort of basic questions about the slides that we can talk, that I can answer quickly as opposed to comments? Because what I'm going to say is, let's throw this open to you. There's no sort of formal sign up, so if people want to talk, there's a microphone there. Yes. The bill almost passed. In fact, that's like the second bullet here. There was legislation that would have required real-time reporting to tell the public, everybody, whenever there was a sewage overflow. That bill essentially didn't make it through the legislature, largely because the Massachusetts legislature was the last state in the union to pass a budget, and it was working on its budget really through July, and then the session ended. That legislation will be in some form refiled, and one of the things on our agenda, that I hope we'll talk about, is the need to have real-time notice at the very least, so people know when to not go in the water. And this is something I would add to that. Bacteria stays in the water and remains potent as it flows down the river for 48 to 72 hours, depending on a lot of factors. But it's not done right after the storm ends. A lot of people don't know that, but if they don't know that there's been a sewage overflow, excuse me, they have no way of knowing how to calculate whether to stay out of the river. And you can guess that in the summer, when you have a really heavy rainstorm and a lot of CSO action, and then the sun comes out and it's really beautiful, it's time to get your paddle board out, right? Wrong. It is not time to get your paddle board out, but there is swimming in the river. That's what that microphone is for. Well, I have an idea. Why don't we move to public comments? And if you could just identify yourself.
I don't think I need a microphone.
Yeah.
Fine. Thank you. My name's Brad Duffin. I live at 3 Johnson Road on Plum Island. I'm a former 21-year resident of the city of Newburyport. I'm also the former chairman of the Harbor Commission. This is outrageous to me. It's outrageous that there's only a couple hundred people here and not 10,000 people. This is a health risk like polio, like cancer. This requires more than just advocates. Why isn't the EPA sitting here tonight? Why isn't our public officials demanding that this change? We're saying that it's New Hampshire that's causing this. That's nonsense. This is America. We're all citizens of America. Nothing can't be fixed without time and money. In my mind, I'm going to be dead in 35 years. We talk about this city, and the jewel of this city is the Merrimack River. It's the waterfront. We talk about all this development that's going to happen on the waterfront. If the general public beyond these borders knew the pollution amount that is in this river, there'd be no more waterfront. Think about the boating community. What brings people to Newburyport? They sit on the boardwalk to watch the boats go by. I belong to the Newburyport Yacht Club. They just pulled 200 boats out of there. You would not believe what comes off the bottom of those boats. If we, as boaters, even think about discharging what's in our tanks, we get fined $10,000 a day as individuals. Why is not the public officials, every one of you that are sitting in here, demanding that this change? I don't understand it. Rusty, if you could, I emailed, so if we don't care about people, we care about animals. I emailed a picture to Rusty of my dog. I live on the basin, and I have the Merrimack River in my front yard. My wife takes my dog out to the river every day during the summer. There are lesions on the side of my dog that the veterinarian now says is staph infection. There's no staph infection on the ground. It's coming from the river. Well, think about the sharps that we have to put in every bathroom where somebody puts an infectious needle in there. Where do you think that that's all coming from? Everything that is flowing into this river. Water is life. And if we can't have clean water, then we don't have life. And I demand, as a citizen of America, wanting to know, regardless of your politics, what are we going to do to demand this change?
That's a question on the table. Thank you. And we will put a picture on our social media feed. Mayor Gray, yes, why don't you do that? We don't have...
I'm Ken Gray, Mayor of Amesbury. I became aware of this problem. There must be some Amesbury people here. But I became aware of this problem about a year ago. I think on the 30th of October will be the anniversary of the event in Haverhill where they lost power during, remember the late October storm that we had. And we were all amazed that there was no backup generator there. And that's when they released we think was 8 million gallons, may have been many times more than that. We just don't know what the number is. At that time, I became aware of the bill passing through the legislature. I don't remember the number of it, but it's the one you referred to here. And it was a very rudimentary bill, by the way. All it really did was it called for improved measurement. And by the way, the measurement that that the legislature was asking for was not that complex. And basically, there were all kinds of ways for the sanitary districts to get around them, which I thought was kind of a loophole. But nevertheless, it called for measurement of outflows and reporting of outflows. It may surprise everyone that I'm a mayor at the end of the river as Mayor Holliday. We weren't getting notifications. It turned out the notifications were going to our health department only because EPA mandated that they go to the health departments. And there were hundreds and hundreds of these events taking place upriver. In the last year, it's gotten slightly better. We occasionally get, and I don't know how your reporting is, but ours is, I get an email maybe after a major rain event, and it'll be basically in hieroglyphics. That's the way. And I'm an engineer, and I can kind of understand a lot of this stuff. But it's CSO number 44, 32 MGD, and that's what it literally. That's what and there may be 6 or 7 lines in the email correspondence. And I'm thinking, what the heck does this mean? So my position and what I think we need to be doing is demanding that, first of all, as a starting point, a bill or a similar bill that has a little more teeth in it than this be passed, and we begin the reporting. With the reporting, what we should be doing is asking DEP to translate the reporting, or some health, or maybe it's the Board of Health, whoever it is, to translate the numbers, the magnitude of the discharges, and something that's actionable for us, because I really feel helpless. I don't know what to do with the information that I get. Should I put up a red alert? Should we, put all the little blue lights lights that we use in the winter and change them to red blinking lights to tell people don't go near the river? Or is it a minor event and just stay away from the water for 6 hours? Or is it, a little more of this and you shouldn't go within a mile of the river? I don't know. There should be some scale so we can warn people, how dangerous it is in the river. With that, and if we publish that every time there's a rain event and we have to tell people to stay out of the river, after a reasonably short period of time, my feeling is that people are going to get pretty upset about this. And when people get upset about it, especially, by the way, you saw Andover? I don't know if there's anyone from Andover. I lived in Andover for 21 years. We thought our water came from Haggett's Pond. It's this beautiful pond. The water station, the water pumping station is right on the pond. Turns out the pond's really not big enough to service a population, about 35,000 people. And when the water level in the pond goes down, guess where the water comes from? It comes in from the Merrimack. I can tell you for a fact, if the people of Andover know what was going on, they would be very upset. And from that upsetting the public comes awareness on the part of public officials, because we can't do it at this level. We can't say to Haverhill or Lawrence, you're going to have to bear the cost. The cost numbers that we were presented in a couple of meetings ago for 3 plants, Haverhill, Lawrence, and Lowell, was about $725 million to fix the problem. That doesn't count Manchester, Nashua, or Fitchburg, by the way. So it's well into the billion-dollar range. They're all under what are called consent agreements, which allow them to continue this behavior legally for some period of time. They're all supposed to be improving. It turns out the last couple of years it's been going the wrong way. Part of that's attributable to climate change, but that's a trend that's going to continue, by the way. It's just getting worse. So it's all going to come down to political pressure put onto our, I would say, federal legislators, because that's the only place there's enough money to solve this problem. And like I say, you've talked to our senators. I've talked to our senators. It's not on their radar screen. There's a lot of things going on in the country, and until it gets on the radar screens because of public outcry, nothing is going to be done about this. So that's sort of where I'm at, and I'm hoping that forums like this start to raise public awareness, and we start talking about it, and we start demanding, in the short term, our legislators in Boston start pressing for reporting and sunshine and by the way, testing in the river so we can establish how bad the problem is. A lot of things that we can do right now, and we should be able to do this within the next legislative session with enough pressure. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Gray. Maybe I'll ask if there are a lot of people who want to comment. Maybe if we kept our comments to 3 minutes or so, that would be great. And I just want to recognize a few other people who are here who haven't been recognized so far. One is Dave Tibbetts. Where is David? Yes, so he's practically in another county, way back there. Former Director of Economic Development in the state of Massachusetts and head of the local Economic Commission. David, it's great to see you. Resident of Newburyport and grew up in Lawrence, which we're hearing a lot about. And also I want to recognize members of my board of directors, Rich Harrington, who is the president of the board, and Kathy Crumbly, and Sarah Beam, who is wearing our fabulous shirt. Anyone who wants one, see us. We provide financing. And her lovely daughter, where are you? Laura. Cutie, our mascot. And also, I want to give lots of credit to John McCone, who's my colleague, who's standing back there and who's helped pull all this together. And we are hoping to bring this forum to other key venues up and down the river, up the river, I guess we'd say, soon. So, we're going to be trying to organize folks in other communities to act together to see if we can get some federal action. But there are things we can do locally. So that's all I'll say. Let's take it away. If you could just say your name and.
So my name is Mike Young. I'm a mostly retired physician. I used to work on things that you don't want to get. And I want to make a couple of comments. The reason I'm here is primarily because when I hauled my sailboat out of the water a few weeks ago, and it's parked about 1.5 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, there were no barnacles on the bottom of the boat. There was one barnacle on the propeller and maybe 3 on the bottom of the keel. And that's the first time I've ever seen that, and I immediately knew exactly what it was. So I don't know whether it's oxygen or the E. coli in the water, or the bioburden, or I suspect it's probably more likely toxins. So just a couple of comments. So all this runoff water that goes into these plants, I mean, the E. coli is one thing, but that's just the easy thing to deal with, and our bodies are pretty familiar with that. But all these toxins are what ultimately cause nasty things like liver cancers. And speaking of money, when you talk about $750 million, that sounds like a lot of money. Well, I will tell you that if you have to try to fix somebody with a liver cancer, it'll cost $3 million to do that. So it's only a couple hundred people that we could maybe fix with that kind of money. So I would suggest that, considering that all the barnacles were dead on my boat, I'm a sailor, so I don't really go out fishing, but I wouldn't eat the fish in the Merrimack River. Given the fact that the barnacles on my boat were dead, that means all kinds of things were dead, and I don't know what would be in the fish. But whatever is in the fish that you eat is then in you. It's a fact of biological concentration. So I guess if I was, I mentioned this to the mayor and told her about this, that if I was in a, maybe I would suggest that we tell people that there's pollution in the river. It's killed things like barnacles, which are at the bottom of the food chain. It's going to be killing things. It's going to be concentrating that up the food chain that you might not want to go fishing. Or if you do, you might not want to eat them. So all that striped bass stuff might be something to worry about at this point. Thanks.
Hi. You might be able to see from my vest. I'm with the Marine Mammal Rescue Team. I rescue seals, dolphins, porpoises, and whales.
Right into your mic.
I'm with the Marine Mammal Rescue Team, and I rescue seals, dolphins, porpoises, and whales. I live here in Newburyport, but our rescue area is from Essex, Massachusetts, all the way up to the New Hampshire-Maine border. And if you're not familiar with what's gone on this year, we've now lost 1,200 seals since July. Although the official federal voice from NOAA is that they're dying from distemper, seal distemper. I'm the one who's out there. And I can tell you that as I'm taking care of them, I'm watching brown foam in the ocean right after the days of this runoff. I have an animal control officer that meets with me in several areas, specifically in Ipswich, who looks at it and says, how does 1 and 1 not equal 2 when we're dealing with dead seals? And I say to her, the official word from NOAA is phocine distemper. And she says to me, and we're buying that? I say, the official word from NOAA is phocine distemper. Now, I can tell you, I have been working with a seal right now on Little Neck Beach. I've nicknamed her Boo Boo because she has an injury. And I first got to her on October 8th. She has an injury at her right flipper, and her flipper is injured as well. She was coughing. Not coughing, I'm sorry, she wasn't coughing, but she was sneezing, which is a sign of distemper. Distemper is an illness that you never want your dog or cat to get. I hope they're all inoculated. However, they are not protected from phocine distemper. They should not be on the beach. They will get phocine distemper. So the symptoms are that they start sneezing and coughing, their lungs fill up with fluid, they get seizures, and they die. And it's an absolutely horrible death that I have watched. It doesn't take long. It takes less than a week for them to die from it. This one was sneezing, so I assumed she'd be dead, and unfortunately we couldn't catch her in time. She went in the water. I got a call yesterday to go back to Ipswich for another seal on the beach, and when I got there, I was absolutely shocked. It was the same seal. Only now this injury is completely infected, and it's because of the pollution in the water. She's at Little Neck Beach. So it's an inlet area. And the water is absolutely disgusting there. Because, in case none of you would know, but I think everyone does, where does the Merrimack River flow into? So she's now heavily infected. Her flipper is so swollen she no longer can use it, and she lists to the left. And yet she's not sneezing or coughing. We consider her an absolute miracle that she's alive, and now we're desperate to catch her because we need to test her to figure out, did she have distemper? And if she did, then it's a miracle she survived, and we need to test her antibodies and everything else. So we're trying to catch her. But the point is many of these seals are eating infected fish. What the first gentleman just stated, it's absolutely correct. We no longer have seen, starfish have not been on any of our beaches, in case you haven't noticed. There's been no starfish for the last 4 years. They're gone from our beaches. Our science center up in Rye, we have to get starfish from other areas and we bring them into our aquariums because there's none around here to get. The same is happening now with sea urchins and other animals that would normally be found everywhere. It's happening now with sand dollars. These are animals that are native to this area and should be here, and the toxins are killing them all. So if anyone questions what's happening, you need to look to the ocean to see what's happening in our river. Seals are considered the sentinels of the ocean. They are the canary in the coal mine. And what happens to our seals is a warning. And when it comes to money, I will tell you this. We are under a UME, an unusual mortality event for the seals. So we are now getting NOAA's getting federal dollars to handle the costs of the death of these animals. Had the rivers been cleaned up, we wouldn't have needed these federal dollars in the first place. And the same is the truth, not completely, we're losing our humpback whales, a higher mortality event with them, with our fin whales, and everyone knows about the right whales. That's major entanglement issues. But we've been seeing humpbacks, the juveniles are eating right along the coastline here in Salisbury, Seabrook, etc. Those waters are contaminated. And so if we don't clean up our act here, they're not going to be coming back because they're going to end up being extremely sick.
Thank you for that testimony. We appreciate it, sir.
Good evening. My name is Mike Lambert. Rhode Island and Narragansett Bay is in the third phase of their diversion tunnels. And I wondered if you could, rather than, I looked at Haverhill. Haverhill's only got about 15,000 users on their sewer system. I think that's about the count. And they've tried over the years to, where people might say that they want sewer, but then the homeowner says, is given a bill for $6,000 or $7,000 to hook up to the sewer. People say, well, maybe I'll stay on my septic. And septic is non-point pollution and causes a lot of problems also with nitrogen levels into water bodies. But how is it that Rhode Island was able to go ahead with that diversion system? And what this is the giant tunnels dug into bedrock. And so they just they're going to be taking their CSOs and putting them into tunnels and then metering it, treating it, and metering it out. But I just wondered how Rhode Island was able to do that and why maybe they're a standalone, why that's a standalone project.
Sure.
Thank you. Richard Harrington. I have over 25 years of experience designing septic systems, drainage, stormwater, sewer lines, worked with municipalities, private homeowners, subdivisions, town halls, libraries, etc. The design was to dump the water and the stormwater and the sewer together into the river. It's designed that way. Now it's unacceptable and we're trying to solve it. Rhode Island spent the money. They had a design, they figured it out, and they're acting on it. The same can happen here. About a year ago, I joined this council. I thought it was important. I live in Tewksbury. My water comes from that. I enjoy biking along it, and I've been to your beaches, and I also have close family members that live in this town. We have a board member from Andover. We do not have any board members from this area. We are welcome to have a subcommittee that can meet in this town hall once on a Tuesday, maybe in the fourth week, and we can expand our web of success up and down the river. What we have also done is we've reached out to the city of Lowell. I went to UMass Lowell. I lived there, I lived close to it, and I also toured their plant when I was in college. I circled back with them, and they are here tonight. So in addition to any other wastewater facility members that are here or represented, I'd like to also meet with you also, and you can talk to me out in the hall. Mark Young is here, he's the executive director, and they recently have Greg Coyle as their engineer. They also met with us, and we're collaborating with the council and the city of Lowell to do testing of the water at their stretch within the city of Lowell. We are also receiving quarterly reports that's posted on their website. They have 8 locations where there's overflows. Now, they can have a 95% success rate when it's raining. So if you get a 95, you get an A in school, but they're chasing this last 5%. They're going to keep chasing it every year, and we can meet here every night if you want. It's not going to solve the problem. We can get together, talk to the politicians, and figure out which ones we can keep chopping off the list. And then you'll have less overflows and a better, cleaner mouth of the river down near the ocean. What is also, I've seen the MGD, it's 1 million gallons per day. It's because that's what a septic system's gallons per day. So you use about 55 gallons a day per person, everyone in this room, to shower, et cetera. They're quantifying that. They have time-clocked areas, and they're reporting that right now. So there's information that you can keep using to contact your local politicians and give them hard evidence of what's happening. That's in addition to Rocky over here who's doing his work with the needles and everything else. So we're beginning our efforts. We're welcoming you to come involved also. And it takes a voice, and then it takes backing from federal money. Because Lowell, Haverhill, Lawrence, this isn't on their radar screen. They didn't design this, but now it's become unacceptable. So we're hoping for your help and the voice, and we'll continue with this effort. So thank you.
Thanks, Rich. And I guess Rich points to an important point. Figuring out, and I don't think it's possible to do this with a group of 100 people, but we should be thinking about what the next step ought to be in terms of organization. What needs to happen to keep things moving forward if we want to deal with this, because otherwise we have a great night right before the Red Sox start playing and everybody goes home and feels good. We need to take some action steps. And I do want to recognize Mark Young, Greg Coyle. Is Sherry Cousins here? Sherry, hi, how are you, from Greater Lawrence Sewage District? And Bob Ward? Bob, are you? Yes, hi, Bob. Hope to hear from each of you. You have your stories to tell, but let's hear from some other folks. And Rocky, I know you'd like to say a few words, and I know a number of others. So if you could keep it to about 3 minutes, that would be great.
Thank you. Derry Bray, Little Red Houseboat, Cashman Park. We've 2 problems here. One is that in the long term, it's going to take a long time to solve this. What can we do in the short term? If I were king, I'd want volunteers or the city to be monitoring the water each outgoing tide. The technology is not that expensive. The process is not that complicated. In conjunction with that, we could easily gather volunteers, all the boaters on the river, to gather samples, teach them how to control the chain of custody and have valid test samples. Again, we should be sampling the water ourselves and not depending on other people to tell us too little, too late. Where I grew up in the west coast of Ireland, on the beaches, they had a signal system when the waters were too rough to swim in: red flag, safe, green flag. In conjunction with this measurement system, we should have a warning system on the riverbanks. If the water is clear, green flag. If it's not, brown and yellow flag. Communication, information. So, Your Honor, Ms. Mayor, if you would consider talking to the City Council and perhaps the sewage treatment plant. I have heard that they have the equipment there to measure the quality of the water. Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Gene Novak. I'm a resident of Plum Island. I like to say my children will be fourth generation. And when I was a young man, I was a lifeguard for a short time on Newbury. And I can remember when we found the first syringe ever. Boy, was that big news. You know, we found a syringe on the beach. I think the police were involved with it. It was something that was completely unacceptable. And I can recall when I was growing up, Plum Island was considered at that time one of the 10 best beaches on the East Coast. And if you go back and look at publications, you'll see that. It was actually in print. You know, fast forward to the recent years, I can remember after Hurricane Irene, the river where it discharged into the ocean, it was biblical. From the Merrimack River south, the littoral flows north to south, it was red, brackish. And from the Merrimack River north, it was blue. You could see, it was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I have photos of this, and I can get them to you if you wish. And then we had the release from New Hampshire, where all the wafers from the sewage treatment plant are down all over our beaches now. And if you look around, you can find them. You'll see them there. So it's, you know, I think people are desensitized to how serious this issue is. It's not uncommon to find syringes on the beach anytime, sanitary devices, you know, you name it, it's there. To me, it's unacceptable. And we talked about how it affected animals and fish that we're perhaps eating. But more importantly, I can attest to you that it's affecting people. And I know firsthand that after Hurricane Irene, beaches were closed. There were notices published there, don't go in the water. And I know personally, and I don't want to give their names out without their permission, but I know people who had to go to the hospital to get treated for rashes and infections. And, you know, being on Plum Island, you're involved in the water quite a bit. We fish and we surf and we paddleboard and swim and everything else. Well, I surf with a number of people down there on Plum Island, particularly on the south end. Some of them can't be here tonight. Someone's actually in the hospital on a separate issue. But he asked me to express on his behalf that when we go surfing after storms, so we are intimate with the quality of the water because we're out, that's when the waves come in, so we're in the water immediately following these events. I can tell you that it's filthy. We see it. You look down and it's horrible. I've never seen it so bad. On a regular day, you don't notice it, but after the storms, it's horrible. The brown foam on the ocean, that's just all over the place. And I noticed a trend. The last several years, a lot of surfers aren't coming back to Plum Island. Again, I don't want to give their names out, and I say, you know, how come you're not coming out? It's too dirty. I get sinus infections. I'm not going there. They go up north now. They go up to Jenners. They go up to Hampton in New Hampshire. They're getting away from it. So we have to look at what is the long-term impact. As this gets more prevalent, and if you start testing the water, you're going to have to report it, and what are you going to start doing? Closing the beaches? And the people that are going to the hotels and going swimming, you're not going to let them go in the ocean? Because that's what's coming. And I think we can't be naive to say, you know, we're going to tinker around the edges a little bit for a generator here or something like this. We've got to think out 10, 20 years. We've got to think about the next generation of people, okay? This is going to take billions of dollars, and it's going to take decades to resolve. Okay, I hate to say it, I agree with this gentleman here who said he's probably going to be dead by the time this is resolved. But it's a Herculean task. We can't be naive, and something has to happen. Thank you.
My name is Rocky Morrison. I'm the president of Clean River Project. I've been cleaning the Merrimack River for 14 years, and I pulled everything you could think of. Needles, you name it. Thank you. So what we've been doing is coming down river with these booms. You can see these things. These trap construction debris, bottles. We pull out tons and tons of stuff that doesn't make it to Newburyport in Plum Island, even though there's a lot still going on. We're hoping to bring our booms further, but we're noticing the CSO, we're noticing the sewage more and more in our booms now. So we have to really up our game now because we just pulled out 5 ton out of Chelmsford, and it was just loaded with all the stuff. So basically you grab the stuff with that hand, that machine, it just smells, it reeks real bad. So we have to change our game now because of what's going on. I mean, we want to put these up and down the river, but when we go up and down the river, we're going to be more and more sewage plants pushing this stuff out. Next year we're going to be in Haverhill, so which is a good big thing for you guys in Newburyport. We're going to have booms in Haverhill, but we're dealing with this problem too now, them releasing out of Lawrence and so forth. So it's going to be in our booms there too. So, you know, I just want to point it out. People think that this stuff goes right down the middle of the river. It doesn't. It washes to the shorelines. It gets in trees that are laying in the waterways. All the debris, the leaves and stuff. It collects it, and it stinks. It stinks bad. We're up in Chelmsford walking the waterways and picking up debris, and you could smell it. You can smell the stuff all over the shorelines. In Haverhill, you can smell it. So it's a big problem. And we have to up our game now, because it's not the hypodermic needles going to kill us. It's the sewage stuff all over our banks, and it's in our traps now. So we put these out there to collect water bottles, hypodermic needles, and stuff like that. Now we're finding a whole different game out here. So I just want to bring that to your attention. It doesn't float down the middle of the river. It goes to the shoreline in our sand. And the sewage disc, you're right. One thing we learned about those discs, got to hooks it. When we learned how powerful this Merrimack River is. When it goes to that ocean, it spreads. I mean, you can find them down the Cape. You can find those discs everywhere. So it shows you what leaves this Merrimack River. It spreads. So for the seals and that, I believe it. I believe it's a problem. And I just want to bring attention that we have a bigger problem. It's not just going down the middle of the river. It's landing on our shorelines and in the woods and everything else. So I just want to bring that to everybody's attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Rocky. It's great to be working with other groups that are all rowing in the same direction. Also, a couple of other, Jim Kelcourse, our local representative. Hi, Jim. Great to see you there. I'm excellent. If you want to say a few words, that would be great. And I don't know if your worthy opponent is here, Jennifer Rocco Runyon, and she is not. Okay. But anyway, welcome. And there's a very little small person. But let's continue with the comments.
My name's Don Manson from Salisbury, and I've been involved with Standing Rock for 2 years out west. And lately this year I've been putting signs on Beach Road about swimming in the pollution. And at first I got a lot of bad comments, and I started getting more from people saying, I didn't realize it. What we need to do is get it out into the newspapers and different, the news. I've been involved with Mindy Messner up in Merrimack, New Hampshire with the PFAAs and the PFAOs, and I've been speaking on a couple things up there. And MUR-TV made one report on it. They were told by their parent company no more. We've heard, through the people, that now you don't hear anything. And it's got to get out to the people. And I advocate every day about the river and clean water. And most people don't realize it. So we got to get it into the newspapers more and on the TV and let people know what's happening. People don't know. People don't know about the meeting.
Thank you very much. Please.
Hi, my name's Janelle. I live in Raleigh. I used to be a Newburyport resident. I just want to reiterate a couple things. I also surf. I don't surf Newburyport anymore, and that's one of the reasons the water here is pretty bad. But I'll say I don't ever surf after a storm, even though that's one of the best times too, because the water is disgusting. I get sick after every storm, so I won't even do it anymore. As far as next steps, I mean, these are all great, and we do have to start tracking this, but there's all the money that goes into doing these systems. I want to ask, is there anything as far as low impact development going on in these towns? Because if we lower the rate of water going in, that's going to lower the rate of these events. So that's something we can do that has immediate action. Mm-hmm. And then I think getting a system in place, an alert system, is huge. And just to go back to, being a surfer, if you're working with the local surf shops between here and Maine, and they're putting out an alert on all of their sites, on their social media, you're reaching tens of thousands of people every time one of these events happens. And then it just trickles off from there. You have tons of photographers in New England that, if they're doing it too, you have a big network to outreach quickly. So I'd suggest getting a system, even if it's just to say there's an event.
Right.
I think that would be huge. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I just want to quickly say that a group of us have applied for a grant. I don't know if we'll get it, but it would be to develop an app that would notify the public on your smartphones whenever there's an overflow, as well as provide other information. So, and if we don't get it from the Woodard and Curran Foundation, we will go elsewhere, because I think it's an idea that is ripe to happen. And I also completely agree with you that step number 8, less stormwater means less overflows. So we need to address that problem as well.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for bringing up low impact development. I think that's really important, and that's something that, as we are, all communities have had to just recently file our MS4 permits for the stormwater. That's something that we are all working on in our communities. We have to do a lot more work in that area, but as we are moving forward with these new stormwater permits and trying to ensure that what's going into the stormwater drains is cleaner, and that we are catching other pollutants, that's a really good idea in terms of starting to expand the work we're doing in terms of low impact development. So I appreciate the fact that you brought that up too.
Hi, my name is Barbara Hopkinson, and I live on Plum Island as well. And this is wonderful to raise awareness and support everything that's going on. But I've really got a concern about what do we do in the meantime to protect our families and kids like my 16-month-old grandson. I'm worried about him even, drinking the water or bathing in the water, or when he should or shouldn't go to the beach, things like that. So what are some good preventative measures while we're working on all this?
Well, I don't think you have to worry about the drinking water. That our water source is from the artichoke, and not everyone particularly likes the quality of our water because it is kind of earthy.
Yeah.
But it's tested regularly. In our water quality, in terms of meeting those standards. You don't have to worry, especially now that there is water out on Plum Island, and so you don't have to worry about it in terms of within your home.
That's good to know.
This is a point where we need more data. I mean, I would ask that all of you who have stories, write them down, take pictures. I'd love to see pictures of those boats that were pulled out of the river, in terms of what was on the bottom. This is the kind of data, the kind of information that it will help us put the story together as we begin meeting with, as I said, I'm meeting with a conference call with Marky's team, environmental team, on Wednesday. I have sent information regarding the slides from both DEP as well as the council to our Governor Baker and to Lieutenant Governor Polito. This group is presenting tomorrow at the Merrimack River Beach Alliance. We're at a point now where, we're trying to do more and more public awareness and education of this, and that's the step where we are. And then the next piece is to try and get legislation passed, and I think we've got a good representation and from the legislators in this area that we can be able to move a bill forward. I feel fairly confident about that, and I know that there was some pushback from the Mass Municipal Association, but I sit on their board, and I didn't realize that they took that position, and we'll work with that group in terms of getting out in front and supporting this. We're also, the Mass Mayors, the Merrimack Valley Mayors and Managers are meeting with the District EPA Director beginning of December. So, we're started. I've just been, beating the drum, and I'm really, really pleased that we're starting to get more and more people and raise awareness at these types of meetings. Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Mark Young. I'm the director for the Lowell Wastewater Treatment Facility and the Lowell Wastewater Drinking Facility. And we're also a member of the Merrimack River Coalition. And we also have our own coalition that we formed of the communities along the Merrimack River: Lowell, Lawrence, Haverhill, Manchester, Fitchburg. When I first came up to this meeting and I looked in and saw all the seats, I was really encouraged because I knew this was going to be a fairly well attended meeting. And like the first gentleman who spoke, his comment was, why aren't there thousands of people here? And there should be. This is an issue that affects all of us, and it affects the professionals whose job it is to clean that river. I'm encouraged by the grasp that the politicians have and the mayors have of the effort that has been done so far. I can tell you in Lowell's case, we've reduced our CSO pollution by over 80%. We spent over $150 million. We're going for another $110 million funding. Of course, my city manager's not here, so he doesn't know that yet, to combat CSOs and other improvements of the treatment plants. But that's only a small portion. It's going to take a greater effort to do that. And it's going to take a concentrated, concerted effort by all involved. I told you we were a member of the Watershed Council. Now, you would think there would almost be an adversarial approach between us and the council. And it's not the case. We all need to work together. We need to get the mayors, the city managers, you people who are affected by this, from Manchester, New Hampshire, down to Plum Island, the watershed groups, not just this one, others, and us, and the communities, the professionals whose job it is to clean that river. That bullet right there, the 9th one, that's the most important. Rusty, that should be on top. That bullet should be number 1. We need to get federal funding, because if it's left up to Lowell, Lawrence, Haverhill, Manchester, and Nashua to pay for it, these are environmental justice communities. It'll take decades because they simply can't afford it. We need federal funding. Bob Ward, Sherry Cousins, myself. We know what's happening. We want to do this. We can do the job. We can clean the river. We can prevent CSO discharges. But we don't have the funding to do it. We need that. We need your help. We need your advocacy. We need your outrage. And we need to work together. And I was encouraged to hear the mayor when her opening remarks about not being adversarial, working together. This is what we need to do. I heard a lot of stories about people from Plum Island that lived up in Lowell I didn't know. I live along the river. I can see the river from my house. I kayak. Lowell has a swimming beach. I swim in it. I love the river. This is my job, is to clean that river. Our job is to clean the river. So we need your help to do this. We know that there's a lot of work to be done. It's going to take time, but unfortunately it's going to take money. And unless we get that money, it's not going to happen. We can talk about the effects all we want, but we need the money. We need to get that federal funding. So I would ask you, whatever you're asked to do by the council, by the mayors of your community, on your own, always advocate for that federal funding. This is what we need. And unless we get it, this problem will not go away. And if there's any questions anybody has for me, I'll be here. I'll let other speakers speak, but I'll be happy to talk to anybody.
Hi, my name is Beth Clary, and I live here in Newburyport. I just have a few very quick questions, not to be answered now probably, but just to float out there. We live in one of the most technologically advanced states in the United States. I have never heard anybody talk about technological developments to work on capturing pollution in the rivers. And I'd be curious if there was some way to communicate whether there are, yes, we need to be political, yes, we need to be proactive as volunteers, but is there a way to tap into the brain power in this state to develop the equipment and technology to address this issue? Just a point of question. The other thing is, I believe the new director of the Essex County Greenbelt Association is the former head of the Charles River something or other, right? Watershed Alliance. If there's a river that's had to deal with a lot of pollution and cleaning up, wow, what a resource we have right in our backyard. We ought to tap into her and get her in on the conversation if she isn't already. Finally, I think this is great. I really would like to be informed and involved. I hear a lot of people talking. I feel a lot of directives coming our way. How are we going to communicate this and keep it going?
Just before
before you speak, thank you so much, Beth. I appreciate those comments. And I was reading about the Charles River cleanup also, and the Conservation Law Foundation and the EPA joined forces with nonprofits, and they filed a class action suit. And I'm not opposed to doing that, but I would like to figure out a way that we can maybe bring our federal legislative delegation together, working with our Mass delegation to see where we go. They're looking at Tiger grants and other programs at Markey's level. Hopefully I'll have some more information on that, and certainly we'll keep in touch. Jack Shea from the Daily News is here. We can continue to communicate information with them. This is on local cable, which will be posted on our local cable site. So, this is a start, a step in the right direction in terms of awareness. I mean it. I want your stories. I want your data. I want your pictures. This is what's going to help us. I'm easy. You know how to reach me. Drop them off. Drop your pictures. Drop your stories off. Send them to the Watershed Council. But we need your data, Rocky. We need some more of your data too. You keep good information. And I'm sorry we didn't get together in terms of doing the stuff we want to do in Newburyport, but there's time that we can make that happen. So I want your stories. I can't emphasize that enough. Our next step, which I had talked to Rep. Campbell about, is that we're going to start setting up a meeting. Next step is after this conference call, we'll pull all the people who want to be together to start talking about this, collecting the data, and working with what are our immediate, short-term, as well as long-term options at this juncture, because I've had it. I am at the end of my rope with what our river looks like, and I will not stop. You'll see a video that I did with the Herald yesterday, and as I said, we've come together and we've begun a whole new focus of working on this. And I know you all want to get to see the Red Sox, but let's have our one last speaker have a chance to speak.
I'll be quick. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have, and I apologize that this is the finger, but I have a story of a $4,000 splinter that I got on my dock at the Newburyport Yacht Club. It was a simple wooden splinter. It went in, I pulled it out, and within 4 hours, it was bigger than my thumb. And it was an infection traveling up my arm. So I got antibiotics, and yesterday I had to have surgery to kind of flush it all out. So there's a $4,000 splinter. Thank you, Merrimack River. And I'll send you the story. No, you don't want to take a picture of this finger like that.
Don't give her the picture.
I've had fun driving. And I also have pictures I can send you of the veritable cesspool floating by my boat most of the summer. So at the Newburyport Yacht Club.
So that we can correlate it with the CSO. So again, I need data. I need good when it happens, time.
So my question is has there been an effort yet on the federal level? Because it's obvious, one thing we need notification around here so that I know when not to get the next splinter. But two is this isn't going to get solved without money. Nobody else has the money but the feds. It costs $13 billion to dig a tunnel through Boston. I got to imagine that with the right advocacy, you can find $1 billion or so to take care of this problem, and that should be the top priority. And I don't know how you guys pull it together. I'm not a politician. And you got that done.
Think of what we could do with $300 million. So I have to share this path. I don't need to do with the actual grid, but which opened today, by the way. Yes. And so we need to put that information together.
And the second thing I can say is I'm just starting to hear this locally from my friends. People are just starting to talk about this and the horror outrage. And the only reason why I don't think they're here tonight is because most of them don't know that this was happening. It's not that they don't care. They do. They're talking about it. And it's going to get louder. Good. And the cost of this economically is going to be huge.
I agree. You're absolutely right.
So what do we tell our neighbors?
So a way to get this louder. I'm Linda Campbell from Methuen. I've worked on river issues for about a decade. A state rep. So we need to make a full-throated effort at the state level, and then go to our federal delegation simultaneously, but we can make a lot of noise, and I want to make sure all of you have signed up so that we can get in touch with you. Because if we file a bill at the beginning of the session, that will require it to have a public hearing, and it has to be filed at the very beginning of the year. But you know, as was mentioned, a lot of good work has been done, and some things will be added to it. It's really important that we are able to make a lot of noise when that bill is filed, because there is money in bond bills in Massachusetts as well, and that is something that we will be competing with the city of Boston for. Marty Walsh was a colleague of mine in the legislature, but I know in the Globe today, he's talking about global warming, and he's talking about state money. So that's what we have to do right away. So I would ask your help in that you provide contact information for us. So when we file this bill, we have a hearing in Boston, we blow the roof off that place when we have that public hearing, and that is going to create a lot of energy and interest amongst our fellow delegation. So that's the start point, and there is money in bond bills. We need to get some of that up here in the Merrimack Valley. Thanks. Oh, and that's why the federal delegation has to be involved. And I think the New Hampshire federal delegation is very sensitive to environmental issues. That's their economy up there as well. So, we're in a good spot. It took a long time to get here, but we're in a very good spot to make noise and to get something done.
We can suggest it, but they're not planning to do it that way. Right? Yeah, that's the problem of living on a life on the river. Yes.
Further way of getting the word out is through the League of Conservation Voters and wildlife sites and things like that. If you can get some of their organizations behind both the bill and the notice will get out, and there's many of
so if you have those suggestions, send them to us. Like you mentioned about the surfing website.
Yeah.
So send those to us in terms of where we can post. But see, one of the biggest problems why we haven't been able to tell you all of this is because we haven't been getting notification. It was all like, oh, it rained, one of the plants somewhere must have something happened. So now we've begun to put sort of the pieces of the puzzle together, and that's why we're able now to know. As Mayor Gray said, I am now getting, I toured the Haverhill plant, I get their information, but I don't know what I'm reading either.
But we should be independently getting this information, shouldn't we?
But there's rules about they only have to report to one person or...
But can't they take an example on the Merrimack, can't they?
Well, yes, yes.
So can't we have a community group or somebody that samples this?
Well, again, there's chain of custody and there's whether or not that makes sense. And so we've got to work out all those pieces, but we will get this together, over the next couple months now that, we've all come together. Information is much more visible. There's much more publicity about this. And, as I said, we will not stop until we start passing a new bill and begin to get our federal mandate.
Where do we send it?
To my website, my email address, or drop them off, or mail them to me. It would be nicer to have them electronically. That's mayor@cityofnewburyport.com.
And also feel free.
Your legislators too, reach out to us, send us emails, give us the information. This is something we've been working on, your representatives, for a while now. Rusty's been great. Rusty and I met at the State House. We've been doing a great deal of work together to try to at least pass some sort of notification system. But as you heard from